especially early career researchers with skills, tools, and resources needed to successfully conduct systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Number two, to cooperate and work with partners, stakeholders, research institutions, and academic institutions to promote, to promote the production and ACRN activities is supported by INAPS and AuthorAid. INAPS is an acronym for International Network for Advancing Science and Policy. ACRN activities are in collaboration with various institutions across Africa. University of Rwanda, Rwanda University of Lagos, Nigeria, University of Calabar, Nigeria, Tropical Institute of Community Health and Development, Kenya, University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria, Federal University of Yekiti, Nigeria, and Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria. Currently, the OP comprises medical and health researchers from undergraduate to postdoctoral levels in more than 10 countries in Africa and Asia. Since the inception of the hub in May 2022, members have been exposed to complementary training courses and writing exercises in systematic reviews and meta-analysis. The focus so far has been on systematic reviews related to malaria, universal health coverage, and non-communicable diseases. Are you interested in joining our global community? Our call for membership is currently open, and this is a link at the end of this training. I'll be dropping the link in the chat box. You can apply to be a mentor if you're an expert in systematic reviews and meta-analysis. You can also apply to be a member if you're looking forward to learning from others, and if you're looking for a team to collaborate with. All right, thank you very much. So at this moment, I would be leaving the floor now for our facilitator. Our facilitator is Mr. Leonard Rosario. He is a researcher and lecturer in Federal University, Oyo-Ekiti, and a systematic review expert with more than 5 published systematic reviews and meta-analyses in top high impact journals. So Mr. Leonard, please, the floor is now open for you. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to first and foremost appreciate the organization for finding me worthy to be invited to give this talk. Automatically, I'm a part of the family, so I believe that I'm at home. And I equally want to welcome each and every one of us, students, even some of my superiors and all of that are here. So I want to appreciate you all for coming to listen to my little knowledge in this aspect. So at this moment, I will want to share my screen. Okay. Please, I don't know, can you see my screen at the moment?
Yes.
Yes, very well.
So I will put it on presentation mode now. So just like we've already been told that the organization is basically to train early career researchers in the aspect of systematic review and meta-analysis. So I was given a topic to speak on, basically. And the topic that I was given is starting a systematic review. development of topics and research questions. My name is Uzaire Leonard. I'm a lecturer. I'm also an early career researcher from Federal University. I'm at the Faculty of Basic Medical Sciences, College of Medicine. By training, I'm actually a medical microbiologist and public health scientist, but with a background in medical lab science. So here, I'll just disclosure. There's no financial disclosure. Part of the material that I'll be sharing in this training was actually part of some of the training that I attended. So I extracted some of the material, then also included some personal materials. So I needed to disclose this. Yeah, I'm also the founder of Research Hub Nigeria. It's also a hub that is into training for early career researcher and also into research development, basically. Now, the outline, we're going to look at what systematic review and some key elements that are within systematic review. Then we'll also look at how to formulate relevant research questions. Then I will stop at, if there is time, I will look at searching the literature, because basically for you to be able to even have a topic, you have to look at what identify a gap in literature. And it's actually that gap in literature most time that you are going to be trying to answer questions based on available data. Yeah, there could be some individual studies that have been done in different countries, but you want to basically systematic review is actually trying to gather evidence, to have a robust evidence to present. That's why basically, for example, if you are doing a PhD, you'll be required to do a systematic review. And the systematic review is so that you look at what has been done, and knowing what has been done, then you'll be able to identify gaps. Then that would be from the basis upon which you are going to develop your thesis or your research on. Even funding bodies of recent also require most times you do a literature review to look at what is already known, so that the fund that will be given to you will not be repeating what a question that is already answered. So that is also very, very essential. Now, when we talk about systematic review, a systematic review that asks actually specific questions. Now, the question must be a clearly stated set of objectives, meaning that for a systematic review, there should be a clearly stated objective. There should be an objective that you are intended to find answer questions to. Then the next one is that there should be a predefined eligibility criteria for that study. Now, by the time we look at some study that I have done, for example, you will see that now before you go into a systematic review, before you do a systematic review, you have to set eligibility. Now, the reason why you need to set eligibility criteria for those studies is that you are bound to meet a lot of studies that may look related to what you are doing. Now, this eligibility criteria, whether inclusion or exclusion as the case may be, will help you to narrow down what the papers or the articles that you are going to include in your study. Then the next one is that there should be an explicit reproducible search methodology. Now, what this means in essence is, if I and my team should do a systematic review on a particular topic, let's say looking at the effect of a particular drug on a particular condition in Nigeria, and I've done, or in the world, for example, and my team did that study in Nigeria, based on the search methodology that I've developed for that study, someone in Asia or someone in America or someone in Europe should also be able to do the same study and produce the same result, provided that the same time frame is also used and the same topic or the same search methodology is also followed, and the same eligibility criteria is equally followed. So there should be your result that you've got should be reproducible by another person based on the search methodology that you have actually set for your study. Now, systematic review also aim to identify all studies. Now, what we are saying in essence is the word systematic in this sense is talking about ability for you to systematically identify all relevant study to that subject that you are looking at. So what we are saying in essence is this: if I'm looking at, like I said earlier, I'm looking at a particular condition in pregnancy, for example, and there is a drug that have been developed, and I've actually done that. For me to be able to do that study, for that study to be systematic, there have to be a method that I have developed, a search method that I have developed that will actually help me to be able to identify all the studies that are available in that have been done regarding that condition and regarding that drug. So that is one thing that we need to also identify. Now, another thing we also need to note is this, is that an assessment of the validity of the finding of the study is also very, very important. And this is what we come about when we're talking about study bias, quality assessment of the included studies and the rest. And we have different criteria. We have different assessment rules that have been developed by different bodies, whether NICE in the UK, whether Joannans, whether BRICS. There are a lot of different bodies that have actually come up with different assessments, quality assessment to validate whatever findings that you're going to be doing. Then the next thing is that it's a systematic presentation and synthesis of the characteristics and finding of the study is also very important. What we are saying in essence is when you've chosen the studies and you've done screen, you've extracted the studies from different bases, and you've also extracted the studies that you intend to include based on the predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria. Now, there is need for you to also to synthesize those the findings within that study in a systematic way. And also the characteristics of the studies have to be included. Now, when we're talking about the characteristics of the study, you need to look at, okay, for example, the author, who are the authors of this study, when was this study done? For example, what was the population of this study? What was if it's a condition that is either present or absent or prevalent kind of study, what was the population and what was the event? In this case, what was the positive rate of whatever outcome you are looking at? So those are some of the things that you need to first and foremost look at. Now, based on this, now I need to, before I come, we move then, basically, we also need to understand that systematic review basically can be actually be done in two forms. There is what we call systematic review with meta-analysis, and there is systematic review without meta-analysis. Now, systematic review basically is just for you to look at all the studies that have been done, extracted, synthesize all the information that you need to get from them. Now, if you're going to subject that study, that the data that you've gotten, the quantitative data that you've gotten, or numeric data that you've gotten from that study to a further analysis, statistical analysis, then you'll be talking about systematic review with meta-analysis. But if you're not going to be doing a if it's not a quantitative data, in this sense, if it's not a numeric data, most likely you'll be doing systematic review without meta-analysis. But I also need to note here that most time people usually made this, there's this mixed up that people usually make. Now, when you hear qualitative systematic review and quantitative systematic review, now you need to know that for a qualitative systematic review, in this sense, you might still go ahead and do statistic on it, but in this sense, you will not be doing numeric statistics, especially for those that are in the social sciences or that are in management sciences. They will yet do a kind of analysis, but they will be doing, most times, they will be doing what we call evidence synthesis using other statistical tools, like your eVivo, to do a kind of a pattern, to get a kind of a sequence or a pattern. They will be looking for a particular sequence in their study. But if you are doing a quantitative study, you will actually be dealing with quantitative values or numeric value. In this sense, you'll be doing more, going into doing forest plots and the rest, as the case may be. Now, these are just some of the studies that I and some of my team have actually done. Now, the very first study that I did, systematic review that I actually did, was in 2020, 2021, when the issue of COVID came up. This particular study, the clinical, sorry, let me see if I can move this. Okay. The clinical characteristics of 4,499 COVID patients in Africa. Basically, this was just to look at the clinical characteristics. Now, a lot of other studies were done outside the country, looking at outside the African continent, then looking at how the clinical characteristics of COVID patients in those continents were, and based on those characteristics, they were able to actually make policy statements that have actually be that helped their policy outcome. Now, what we did, it was actually, this was just done by two of us, Testimony and myself. Testimony is a colleague who is at the Redeemers University. So we came together and we discussed and we came up with this study. And the study was actually to look at what were the clinical characteristics of this patient. Now, if you look at this study, basically, now the question here is that what are the clinical characteristics of COVID patients in Africa? Now, what did we do? And we wanted to do, meta-analysis, basically, to check, okay, yeah, there are a lot of studies are being presented in Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in Egypt, in several African countries on the clinical characteristics of COVID. But there are a lot of, we need to know, okay, what are really the most prevalent, or what is the most pronouncing clinical characteristic that is being presented by COVID patients in Africa. Now, we looked at all the studies that have been done in Africa that have actually identified COVID patients, that have also discussed clinical characteristics of those patients, and we extracted them. And based on that, we are able to come up with 4,499 COVID patients in several other studies. Now, the question that we wanted to answer, like I mentioned earlier, was what are the clinical characteristics? Now, the eligibility criteria that we set, that was set for this study, that the study must be done in Africa, and the patient must be QROPC confirmed. Then there were other criteria too that were set. If you can take your time to look at that particular paper. Now, going to the second paper, the global prevalence of colistin resistance in pleb pneumonia from bloodstream infection. This is actually a global analysis. Now, what informed this study? Now, it's been known that a lot of organisms, especially pleb pneumo, is actually becoming resistant to colistin. Same with Acinetobacter and some other organisms. Yes, so we came up with, okay, how do we look at this study? Now, if you take your time to look at this study, you're going to see that, yes, a lot of study were excluded from this study. Now, in designing your study, you need to be very conversant with the methodology that are used within the primary study. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is if you are not conversant with the methodology, you will be including studies that are going to bring bias to your study or to your analysis in the end. Now, what you need to do, like this study, what we did was, okay, now a lot of studies have reported colistin resistance in Kleb-Nemo. Now we need to now identify what is actually the identified method of colistin resistance identification. Now, some people, some studies use Vitex, some use disc diffusion, some use the microprate dilution method, which is actually what is recommended by CLLS and some other body. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this scenario is because if you don't understand the methodology, you will end up doing a study that will not be what? That will not stand the test of time. Now, what we did was, in as much as there are a lot of studies that have reported colistin resistance, now we need to first and foremost answer the first question: was the right method used? Now, you may have reported colistin resistance. For example, if a study that reported colistin resistance, for example, and just used only disc diffusion, you know that that is not globally accepted. And because of that, that study automatically will not meet the criteria that is set for that study. Same also with a lot of other criteria too that were also set. Now, the next study was to look at systematic review of a surveillance system for AMR in Africa. Now, what this study intended to look at was to look at the surveillance systems that are being developed in Africa, that are in operation in Africa. Now, we wanted to see what were these systems. And this study is one of the most beautiful studies that we have actually done. And you see that if you are able to do a good study, you will be able to publish them in good journal. The first one was published in Journal of Medical Virology, is a Q1 journal. The same with the second one in Pathogen, NDPI. Then the recent one was also published in Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, which is one of the top journals too in antimicrobial resistance space. So once you are able to develop your method well, you'll be able to actually have a very good outcome. Now, this will take us to, sorry. So this will take us to, why is it not? Okay, sorry. So this will take us to, I want to talk about, there's actually what we call the cycle of systematic review. Now, when we talk about the cycle of systematic review, we're talking about the process that you need to undergo for you to have systematic review. And in this sense, is either with meta-analysis or not with meta-analysis. Now, the first thing that you must, in that cycle, is actually what we call, you need to define your research question. And I want you to know that your research questions will determine the topic. That's most, if you check all the examples I presented here, the first one is systematic review of surveillance systems for AMR in Africa. Now, the research question that we are that underpin this study is that what are the surveillance systems for AMR in Africa? Now, the second study is global prevalence. The research question is what is the global prevalence of colistin resistance in Kleb pneumonia from bloodstream infection globally. Now, the next one is what is the clinical characteristics of COVID patient in Africa? You see that this is actually what, this is actually what we inform your, that is going to inform your topic. So you need to, is your research question basically that determine your, once you are able to identify or design a research question, determine a research question, automatically that will be the basis upon which you are going to, your topic is going to be. So the first nut that you need to crack is what is to determine your research question. Once your research question is determined, then you are sure of what your topic is going to be. I hope you can still hear me very well, so that it won't mean that that I'm speaking to myself. Can you hear me very well?
Yes, very well. We can hear you very well.
Okay, thank you. So the next thing is for you to determine the eligibility criteria and method for review. Then you do your search. You do your search for studies. Then you apply eligibility criteria. Then you collect your data and critically appraise them. That would talk about quality assessment. Then you analyze and present your results. Then the next thing, if is you interpret your result, then you form your conclusions. Then you complete your structural reports. So this is just the cycle, but based on the topic that I was given, so based on the topic that I was given, we're going to see that basically we are going to be looking at the first and the second cycle. Now, I just bring this up to try to actually bring up kind of our puzzle. Now, why do we do a systematic review? So now, the reason why you will do a systematic review, for example, are enormous. Now, another thing is that you must also make sure that not doing a systematic review will actually have some consequences. The first one is that you will reach doing research for which the answer is already known. So what is the essence of spending the already scarce resources in doing something that is already known? Now, as a master's student or as a PhD student, I have a topic that I want to do, or have a project. As an undergraduate student, I have a project that I want to do, or my final year project that I want to work on. Now, and this work I have think about is going to be wonderful. Now, the next thing that I need to do is to go and do a literature search using the keywords from my proposed topic. I'm talking about if you want to do an ordinary study now. Let's say I want to do a particular gene identification in a particular bacteria from a particular line of infection. Now, that I've seen that is going to be it will help me to answer some research questions. Now, the question that I need to ask myself, how am I sure that this study is already done? Now, the only way through which I will be able to answer this question is to actually go and do a literature search to check, okay, when I'm talking about literature search, now a systematic literature search to check, okay, if this study have actually been done using the keywords that based on that potential topic that you are looking at, check, okay, is it available? Is this topic available? That is what systematic review will tell you if you are a PhD student, a postdoctoral student, or even you are looking for funders to fund your work, because you have to justify the reason why, as a funding body or a funding agency, why should I give you my money if the work is already done? So you reach doing a research that is already, the answer is already no if you do not do a systematic review. The next one is that you limit opportunity to learn from previous sources and failure when designing your own study. Now, the beauty of a systematic review is that it will help you to identify the limitations that are in other studies. Then you will, those limitations, whether in methods, whether in design, whether in location, wherever, those will now form the basis upon which you are going to now form your own research. Now, there is no problem, for example, if a study has been done already in America, or in Europe, or in Asia, and I want to, and I've done a literature search, and I've identified that, okay, that such study is not yet done in Africa, for example. Now, if I'm going to be applying to a funding body, now the evidence of the reason why I need to do that study will be that, okay, I have done a systematic review. Probably you may have even published the systematic review. Then you will not identify this gap. So it's based on this gap that I've identified in literature that is pushing me, or that is driving me to actually do this study. And if you're able to present that logically, that will be basis upon which the funding agency that want to do your study, that want to fund your study, will be obliged to fund to you. Then the next one is that you also miss opportunity to design your own study. The reason is that if you don't do a systematic review, you end up doing a study or a design that will be done by somebody else. Now, another thing about systematic review is that if a method has been used that you've identified in literature, you cannot decide to use another method which will also be acceptable. Let's say, for example, for those in pharmaceutical microbiology, you want to do, let's say, in extracting a particular plant, ethanol has already been used. Now, you can decide to use another extracting method that have not been used before, then trying to now check whether there is going to be more active ingredient based on this method that I have used or not. So these are some of the things that we need to do. So in doing so, it will help you to design your study. It will make it easier to discover your eventual findings. That is also very, very important. When you do a very good literature search or systematic review, when you are discussing your result or the finding of your result, you won't have issue because you have actually consulted quite a number of literature. So sorry, okay. Now I just brought something so that you'll be able to differentiate between what a narrative review is and also what a systematic review, so that you will not end up having doing a narrative review when what you are actually doing is actually just a narrative review instead of a systematic review. So these are just some of the features. So the first one is actually the question. You need to the question in narrative review is usually often broad in scope. But for systematic review, it has to be focused. It has a focus area. Just like the one I showed you just now. We are not looking at colistin resistance in all microorganisms. Not even the organism we chose, the Kleb-Nemo, we are not looking at it in all clinical isolate, but we are just interested in bloodstream infection only. We want to check, okay, what is colistin resistance from by Kleb-Nemo from bloodstream infection. You see that it is specific. But if you are doing a narrative review, you can decide to look at colistin resistance by Kleb-Nemo, for example, in gram-negative bacteria. You know, that is broad in scope. So because of that, it is actually not focused. Then the next one is your search method. Now, usually there is no specific search method, and because of this, potential bias are often very, very found in narrative review. So the next one is that you have a predefined protocol-based explicit search strategy. That is why if you are doing a systematic review, now it is required that you actually register them in a certain body, whether in Cochrane or if it is a drug-based study or a clinical trial-based study. It's expected that you report them in Cochrane. But if it's going to be any other, whether clinical trial, then you can actually register them in Prospero, which is actually by University of York in UK. So the next one is your inclusion of study, what you are going to include, your search medium, and all of that. So we'll look at this if time permits, and probably maybe if there another person or in the future we have time to discuss again, then we'll actually be looking at each of these different criteria that are listed here based on systematic review. And that is why I remember when this organization was being launched, we actually mentioned that systematic review cannot be taught in a sitting. So you see that it's just question now that we are still talking about. So in determining your research, the next thing is in doing the systematic review, we already identified the cycle of systematic review, for example. So the first thing that you need to do based on what the cycle says is to define your research question. You need to know what your research question is. And in knowing your research question, this is actually what is going to help you to do the other aspect of your work of the systematic review in an acceptable way. If your research question is not well designed or is not well defined, it will have impact on your later outcome of the study, because in the end, it will be queried. So now, what's the point of a research question? Why do we have research question? Now, let's just assume now we want to do a study. Okay, we'll get to that in a jiffy. Now, in identifying a research question, the first thing is that you define the nature and scope of the review. That research question will help you to define the scope of your review. The next one is that it identifies
Sorry, everyone. I think Mr. Leonard has some network issues. You'll be joining us soon, please. But we are noting down your questions, and towards the end, or whenever it's comfortable for him, we are going to present it to him. But please, we don't need your emails, please.
Hello.
Thank you.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Sorry. The network actually took me out. So I was actually talking about the need for having a defined question. The first thing is that you define the nature and the scope of this research question actually define the nature and the scope of your review. And the next one, it helps to identify keywords. And this is going to actually determine the scoping, will actually help you to determine the scope of your search also. Then the next thing is that it determines the search strategy that you're going to undertake. And because of this, it will actually provide guidance for selecting the primary research papers that you are going to include in your study. So if your research question is not well defined, it will have an ending effect, a negative effect on your final outcome. So the next one is that it will also guide the data extraction and sentencing of your result. So it's based on your research question that will actually determine what are the elements that are going to make that you are going to be extracting from that you will be extracting from the study. So if your question require that you extract the period of study, for example, it will be extracted. If the study also require that you extract the location where this study was done, it will be extracted. So these are the things that are actually going to determine that we have a long effect on the final outcome of whatever study the final outcome of your study rather. Now, this is just a kind of a show of what type of research question that you can see here. Now, you can see the first question is talking about investigation and surveillance, for example, and the research domain here is description of the outbreak, search for causative agents. Then the detailed research objective here is that we are looking at the time, the place, the person. Then we are looking at identification. Then in transmission, we are trying to now check, okay, what are the modes of the transmission of this particular either disease or whatsoever it is. Now, let's use this for example. Now, we know that antimicrobial resistance, for example, has been found in both animal, in environment, and also in humans. Now, for example, if I'm trying to check the dynamics of the transmission of, let's say, Escherichia coli, for example, within these three sector. Now, what I will be doing if I want to do a systematic review to look for a particular dynamic of a particular gene, let's say MEK gene, for example, in Staph aureus, and I want to check the dynamic of this transmission in these three domain that I mentioned: the human health sector, the animal health sector, and the environment. Now, what we're going to the objective that I'm going to be looking at is actually looking at, okay, this particular gene in this particular organism across all samples that are gotten across this sector. But you see that is still very broad. Now, I need to actually narrow down, okay, what particular gene am I looking at? And that will bring about, okay, I'm looking at A gene, for example. Now, for the people that are in social science, for example, let's say you are looking at a particular behavior, in, let's say, sociology or psychology. For example, let's say there is a kind of a practice or the way in pregnancy, for example, or a particular exposure to a particular women or pregnant women that actually make them to have autistic children, for example. Now, you know that you need to look at, okay, that this particular, either is it a behavior or is it a particular drug, or are they exposed to is there a particular gene that is actually that are being identified in all the women that have autistic children, for example. Now, in wanting to answer that question, you need to identify, okay, the question is that, okay, are there gene, is gene implicated, are there gene implicated in autistic, in giving birth to autistic children, for example? Now, for you to be able to answer this kind of question, you need to look at studies. For example, if it's a systematic review that I'm doing, we need to look at studies that have been done in both autistic women and not autistic women. Sorry, women that give birth to autistic children and women that do not give birth to autistic children, and that a particular gene that is suspected, for example, has been checked in both this autistic group and non-autistic group, and check, okay, is it higher in the autistic group or not in the autistic group? So this is actually what you need to do in setting your research question or research objective. For example, you need to have a defined research question, and it is that defined research question that is going to pin the basis of whatsoever that you are going to do. Now, if you are looking at risk factor, for example, you will be looking at clinical presentation, you'll be looking at certain risk factors. You also be looking at diagnostic assays. Does diagnostic means have impact on this or not? So those are some of the things that you will be looking at. Then the next one is that in developing your research question, you need to have a free form question. Now, it must be defined by a simple language. It should not be vague. At no time should anything be vague in your research question. Your research question should be plain, to be easy to understand by anyone, and if it's very direct and if it's very now I was opportune to examine a particular systematic review that was done by someone. The person did a very wonderful work, a very complex a gene-based analysis work, a systematic review. But you know that in the end, the person's work was not, the mark that was expected was not actually gotten. The reason that was given by the reviewers was the research question that you said was not answered. And why was it not answered? Because a very vague, a very complex complex vocabularies were used, that in the end, something that was supposed to just be plain, so that in the end, even a layman, once he reads your work, we know that, okay, yes, this person has actually answered the research question. So these are some of the things that you need to bear in mind. And you should also describe the query that you are interested in. So your research question should be defined by a plain language. Sometimes it can be sometimes it can be vague, but you must make sure that in the end that it described the query that you are interested in. Now, example that that was given here was, what effect does pain killers drug have on pregnancy? For example, what are the effects does painkiller drug have on pregnancy? Now, for you to be able to answer this question, these painkillers drug are broad. This is already a very vague, there's also already an element of vagueness there. So there is need for you to define, okay, which particular painkiller drug are you looking at? Are you looking at paracetamol, for example? Are you looking at other kind of painkiller drugs? So you need to make sure that if, for example, if you want it to be plain, for example, your question should be, what effect does paracetamol use in pregnancy? Or what effect does paracetamol use have on pregnancy? So that is more defined and it is more plain than if you were using just painkiller as the case may be. This is just an example. Now, in defining your research question too, you have to follow a structure. And your structure, the structure that is usually identified or that we use in systematic review is what we call PICO, or in this sometimes PICO-X. Now we have the population, which is P. We have intervention or exposure. Then we have comparators. Then we have outcomes. Then we have study design. So this is actually how your research question should actually bear all of this in mind. Should have all of this structure in mind. Now, for example, the first systematic review that I did, like I showed you, was clinical characteristics of 4499 COVID patients in Africa. You see that population has been defined. There might be intervention or no intervention. In this case, there's no intervention, there's no comparator, but outcome is also there, which is the clinical characteristic that we are looking at. Then sometimes study design, and I need you to note that most times, all these four elements may not necessarily be in your systematic review, but at least some population must be there. Sometimes intervention can be there or exposure. Sometimes there might be a comparator. Then outcome will always be there because it's the outcome that you are looking at. Then also sometimes, study design may also be equally there. Now, looking at population, for example, the patient population or disease of interest is a population. Now, how is disease or condition defined? What are the most important characteristics that describe this population? So, for example, if you are looking at pediatrics or looking at pregnant women, those are population. Now, any relevant demographic factors, for example, age, sex, ethnicity. Now, there are some kind of systematic review that we'll be doing. For example, if you are doing systematic review that have to do with a particular food, for example, or drug. Now, there are some factors that you may consider. Does sex bring bias into it? Does age bring bias into it? Does gender bring bias into it? Does ethnicity, for example, there are some ethnic group of people that are actually prone to a particular disease or particular condition, for example. So if you are not careful, if you don't put those co-founders or co-founders in check, they will end up actually interfering with your clinical outcome rather. So the next one is that, what is the setting? Are you looking at the hospital, or you are looking at the community, or you are looking at the both? Now, the next one is that are there other types of patients who should be excluded because they are likely to react to the intervention in a different way? Now, this is when you are looking at clinical trials. Some of the conditions that we presented here actually majorly if you are looking at clinical trials. Now, like I mentioned, talking about pediatric patients, talking about pregnant women, you should not be kind of because I'm always mentioning pediatric and pregnant women. Those are actually like my area of interest of research to some extent. So now the next one is intervention. The intervention or range of intervention of interest. What is the experimental intervention of interest? For example, are you introducing drug, were drug introduced to the treatment arm and a particular drug or placebo was given to the control arm? This is when you are doing a study. You know, I need to also, for the want of time, systematic review historically actually started from when the issue of clinical trial, for example, we wanted to check, okay, is there need for to continue this drug or to look at, okay, two set of drugs that are being given to two set of people, the same environment, the same conditions, and what their outcome. Those were actually what necessitate this issue. The issue of need to actually synthesize evidence, because if I'm just looking at one study, but if I'm able to bring several studies together, then my evidence will be stronger. So that was actually what give rise to systematic review. So interventions too, you need to check, okay, does the intervention have variations? Like I mentioned, are all variations to be included? For example, age, sex, gender, ethnicity, and a lot of other factors that can also be. How will trials, including only part of this intervention, be handled? So you need to also bring those into perspective, especially if you are going to be doing a systematic review that are connected with clinical trial. So you must be able to handle every of this arm of the study, and how will clinical trial, also including interest, for example, could be combined with another intervention behind it. Let's say a study that is looking at the use of a particular drug, then another patient that is taking that drug is also taking another drug. So you should be able to control all these different arms of the study, just the way you control the different arm of your study when you are doing an experimental or an ordinary research that is not systematic. You should also control the same these same variables in the same likewise in for this kind of study too. So the next one is, are you looking at comparison? What is the intervention should be compared against? What are you comparing the intervention against? What is the comparison of comparison of interest? Does the comparison have variation also? Are all variation also included? Not just like we've handled in the issue of the intervention. So the outcome too, you need to also be able to measure the outcome, and you must also be very careful, because we've seen some studies that in the end, that most people end up discussing the secondary outcome and actually left out the primary outcome. Now, for every systematic review, there is usually a primary outcome. Now, the primary outcome should actually be what your research question is. Now, there could be other outcome. For example, if you are doing, let's say, in the use of this a painkiller, like I mentioned, in pregnancy, like I mentioned, there are other things that you may want to check. You might check, okay, the use in trimesters, in different trimesters, the use in respect to every other in tribe in different countries. Those were not the initial design of the study or the outcome of the study. The primary outcome of the study is to actually check the effect in pregnancy. So if you have not answered the question of effect of painkillers used in pregnancy, you have not actually answered the question. Even though you answer in trimesters, you answer the issue of ethnicity, you answer the issue of any other issue that of variation that you may bring into perspective. If you have not answered the primary, if the primary outcome is not yet determined, you've not done anything. So that is also very, very important. Now, the next one is that you need to look at time frame. You need to check the time frame of this. You need to also check the time frame of the outcome measure. Now, if you are talking about clinical trial data, for example, you need to check, or for example, this issue of COVID now, like we mentioned, now, some journals have actually written to us, for example, asking us to do an updated version of an updated report of what we reported. And also between that study that I mentioned earlier has actually been cited severally by a lot of, is one of my most cited paper at present. And a lot of feedback is actually coming for us to now do more work on it. So time frame, the reason why I'm bringing that is time frame. No, we did that when COVID was just at the beginning. Now, they are trying to say, okay, can we do a study that will actually look at more study that will bring that to see, okay, if that initial evidence that we presented, if that evidence will still be consistent. So that's actually the reason for systematic review. Now, evidence that was true 10 years ago may no longer be true today. That's why you see that, for example, there are variation in use of drugs that were effective 10 years ago. By the virtue of new evidences from systematic review, they be found not to be effective any longer, and they be dropped out. Now, another study, a study, for example, that I'm presently doing, I'll just give us a hint. Is actually looking at, for example, all of us know these opportunistic parasites. These what is it called now? Cryptosporidium. You know, cryptosporidium was a serious issue several years ago in several countries. But do you know that by the virtue of evidence that have been gotten from systematic review, some country has actually taken them out of their routine check in pregnancy or in some other, same with Toxoplasma gooding, for example. These were things that were being checked on routine basis, but because of time that I've actually checked previously and with evidence, recent evidences, it has actually been found that there is no longer need to actually check them in some developed country, but in developing country, there are still issues. So that's why, and the governments of those countries were still spending billions in dollars to actually actually for vaccine and the rest, to make sure that their women are prevented from getting secondary outcome from it. But do you know that because of impact from systematic review, they've actually been able to take that out of it, and resources will now be channeled. So the importance of time frame is also very important, although it is optional in some cases. Now, these are just some examples that I presented. Now, in this population, we are looking at population and their problems. Now, in patients with acute asthma, for example, the intervention or issue, how effective are antibiotics, for example. So the next one is comparative intervention as compared to standard care. Now, what we are saying in people with acute asthma, for example, does antibiotics have effect? And if they have effect, comparing that with the standard care that is already known what it is. Now, the outcome, does it reduce total production and all of that? You know, these are some of the things that you check. The second one, in children with spinal deformity, for example, how effective is bouncing as compared to observation? You know, these are some of the things that you need to also look at. Another one, in children with fever, for example, how effective is paracetamol as compared to ibuprofen? You know, both of them are pain relievers. So these are just some of the examples that I try to present to help you to actually think how your research question can actually be designed to have a very good outcome. So, like we mentioned, these are some of, I'll actually skip some of these things. Like this now, what effect does alcohol use have on pregnancy? in pregnant women, does daily alcohol use compared to no alcohol use increase risk of congenital malfunction in children, for example? Now, what we are saying, this kind of a clinical trial study. We are looking at pregnant women that take alcohol and pregnant women that does not take alcohol. Now, in the end, meaning that we need to follow these women up after to their birth to check, okay, the children that they are going to give birth to, are they going to have a congenital malformation in them for those that use alcohol as compared to those that do not use alcohol? So you can see that we have population in this case, talking about pregnant women, intervention, we are talking about alcohol use or no alcohol use, while comparator, we are looking at non-alcohol use. Then the outcome, we are looking at congenital malformation in their offspring. So, sorry, this should be malaria, please. It should be patient with recurring malaria, but just that this one is, what is the best way to treat recurrent malaria, for example? It said, in patients with recurrent, does prophylactic anti-malaria compare with placebo-reduced recurrent rate, for example? So we are saying that patients with recurrent malaria, when you use a prophylactic anti-malaria drug compared to placebo, for example, does it actually reduce recurrent rate of malaria? So these are actually some of the way you design your questions. So these are just, I will keep, then the next one is to define your eligibility. I think for the want of time, and also so that I will not go outside the scope that I was given, I'll just quickly move to some of the database that you can use, search. So basically, these are some of the databases that you can actually use to search for systematic review. You can use PubMed. It's actually free, freely available. Then eBay, if you are doing a health-based study, it's highly advised that you use eBay. Then for health-related study too, you can use your CNES. Then you can also use, for those in South America, they can use Linus. Then for French study, you can use ELISA. Then if you are doing psychology, you must surely use PsycInfo. Then if you are doing science or general-based study, you could use Scopus, Web of Science. And if you are doing a study in Africa, you must check Africa Journal Online. If you are doing study in Africa, you don't include African Journal Online as one of your search database that you search, it will automatically include bias, because a lot of studies that are done in Africa may not actually meet up to PubMed, may not even be published in Scopus rated journals, may not be published in Web of Science, but they may most likely be indexed in what is it called? In African Online Journal, that is the AJOS. So it's very, very important. So if you are doing a clinical trial, you need to actually check this particular databases too. Then these are some conference proceedings, because some studies too are presented in conferences that you need to also search to check. They may not be in Web of Science, they may not be in PubMed, but they can be in any of these proceeding indexing body. So, and when you are also doing the studies, there are some database you need to also check. For example, your ProQuest for dissertation and thesis from a different study, and a lot of other electronic-based databases. Then these are also some government websites where you can actually get studies. We are doing a multi-country studies. You also need to, and another thing, know that when you are doing your search, you have to also do what we call manual search. Now, these are examples of manual search. There are some data that may be available that may not be present in any peer review journal, but may be available in this government website. And sometimes you may even reach out to some authors that are authority in that area of your study to actually send you to check if they have access to any data that may be available. So thank you for listening. Then I'm ready to take questions at this moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. I believe that you have learned a whole lot from this presentation. Please keep dropping your questions in the chat box. Mr. Leonard, we have so many questions. I don't know if we will be able to take all of them, but let's see how many you can take, and maybe the ones you cannot take, maybe you can address them in the group. But please let everyone drop their questions in the chat box. We might not give everybody opportunity to speak because of the
I think
time
some persons are also raising their hands. Then
yeah, that is what I'm saying. Unless it's really, really important that you have to speak. But otherwise, kindly drop it in the chat box and I'll read it out for the facilitator because we have other questions that are already lined up. Okay, Mr. Leonard, let me, there are so many questions, so just see how we can quickly address them, please. The first question says, I did not use protocol development in the cycle presented. Is it a requirement for a systematic review?
Okay, he is okay, did not see protocol development. Now, everything that I've said so far is actually, you need to, in developing, even before you develop your question, you need to develop your protocol. And that's why, if you remember, I mentioned that there are protocol registering body that you have to register your protocol with. I mentioned Prospero, I mentioned Cochrane, then I mentioned some other ones. So once your protocol is ready, you have to, some journals make it important enough for you to actually register it with any of those, especially your Prospero. Prospero is like the database for registration database for systematic review globally present. But if you are going to be doing more of clinical trial, then you may have to register it on the Cochrane. Cochrane is more into clinical trial based systematic review. So protocol, yes, some journals will require that you develop and register your protocol, but it may not be a requirement if it's just for, if it's just you want to publish. But the reason why it is good for you to register it, so that you will not end up doing something that in the next 2 months, you will see someone already published it. So why is important is that when you register your review with, register your protocol rather, if anybody goes ahead to actually want to register it in the future, it will be flagged that, okay, someone else is already doing that work. And peradventure someone else went ahead to publish it before you, you can still publish your findings because you were the first person to actually register the protocol. So it is good, especially if you are doing a multi-study or a funded study, they will require you most time to actually register your protocol. And the reason why you also need to register your protocol, it will scrutinize your searching, your methodology, your search methodology, because your methodology majorly is actually what you are registering. They need to check to be sure that your methodology is sound and it is reproducible. So I don't know if that answers this person's question. Hello? Effion, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Let me read the next question, please. Must you first register the review before starting a systematic review? Yeah, I think you've answered that, and somebody answered that in the chat box. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Can systematic review be done individually?
No. It is not advisable for one person to do systematic review. The reason is because there's what we call quality and validation. Now, when you do, especially in your astral screening, when you finish, one person, when there is a dispute, for example, that's why it is good either, at least I usually advocate maybe 3 persons. When 2 people do article screening, there might be what's it called? A dispute between the 2 reviewers. Now, the 3rd person will come to actually settle that dispute. Now, what I'm saying in essence is that this one will say include this article. It means the inclusion criteria. This one will say no, it does not meet the second. There's need for another person to come and check it. And another thing in also quality assessment, it is good that 2 people actually do quality assessment. So yes, one person could do a systematic review, but I think the least I've seen is 2. I don't think I've actually seen a systematic review that was done by a lone person. I don't think I've seen. But I think at the beginning, when systematic review was just being started, I think, yes, possible some persons has actually, one person has done systematic review, but presently, I don't think any journal, a very sound journal, will actually accept to publish a sound systematic review that is done by one person. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. The next question says, can we conduct a meta-analysis without systematic review?
A meta-analysis without systematic? Yes, if you can see, if you actually see what I just, if you should see, okay, if you should see what I just presented, the question was that if, what's it called now? Please, let me be sure. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, can you do
okay, yeah, if you can do a meta-analysis without systematic review. Yeah, it is possible, but the truth is you will only be reporting the meta-analysis without the systematic review. But there is it's not possible for you to do a meta-analysis without going the process of systematic review, because you have to systematically search your database, screen your database to get what's it called, to get the eligible studies. Now, you may not be reporting the systematic review aspect of the work. When we talk about systematic review, for example, maybe the study characteristics and the rest. Now, the meta-analysis is just the statistical aspect of the work. So yes, you can report the statistical aspect of the work only, but it's actually not possible for you to just do a systematic review without, do a meta-analysis without undergoing a systematic review process. Over.
All right, thank you very much. Which platforms are the best ones to target? Is it PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, any others?
No.
From a participant?
Yes, it is not. It's never advisable for you to use one database to do to do systematic review. Now, the reason why it's called systematic review is that you try to make sure that you include what's it called? You include as many studies as possible. Is that okay? As many studies as possible. Now, there are some studies that are not indexed in PubMed that may be indexed in Scopus, that may be indexed in Africa Online Journal if it's an Africa-based study, or that may be indexed. There's this WHO database that synthesize, that try to grab studies that are done in different parts of the countries. So it is very essential and it is very necessary that you use several databases so that you will be able to include studies that are that all the relevant study or all the eligible studies are included. So if you are just using only PubMed, for example, you'll be leaving out studies that are eligible that are not in PubMed, and automatically you'll be introducing bias there. So that is one. So it is good you use, usually I advocate use use 3 or more databases. And if you are able to use several databases, good for you. The only thing is that you will do more work. Now, there are also tools that are being produced because I'm not actually dealing with the search and the screening aspect. I'm not going into the different tools that are available. There are tools that have now been made available that you can actually synthesize, that you can use to actually eliminate a similar study. Let's say the study is in PubMed, is in Scopus, is in Web of Science. So that would be 3 studies. So if you pass them through an automated system, it will remove all those duplicates. So there are actually systems that when you are drawing your Pisman flow chart, there are actually tools that are designed to remove those. So the major reason why people were limiting the number of database was the enormous work that needs to be done. But if you are able to actually use these automated tools, you can use as many as many databases that are available for you. Then you just use technology to reduce this distress. Over to you, Ephraim.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So many questions coming in. I don't know what to do. This one says, which one to start first? A literature review or a systematic review as a young researcher? Then let's see, the same person says, can a systematic review be done by an undergraduate? If yes, can an individual do a systematic review? Okay, that one has already been answered. So can a systematic review be done by an undergraduate? And which one should it start first, literature review or systematic review?
I think it's usually advocated for undergraduate. It's good you start with scoping review, narrative review, literature review, basically. Now, when you've developed capacity in those aspects, then you can transition into systematic review. Now, to be sincere, systematic, if you want to do a very sound systematic review, it is time consuming. So as an undergraduate, yeah, I've worked with some undergraduates in the team that were involved in systematic, but they were not the design, they were not the lead author. So they came in as supporting authors. So it's not usually advisable for you to just as an undergraduate. So yeah, it's good. Develop your capacity first in literature. In fact, in writing first, because if you are not in article writing, in literature search and all of that, so once you develop your strategy, then you can begin to come in as supporting authors. Now, supporting probably your supervisors or your mentors to maybe you help them to screen articles or help them to extract data from the article. Then you start developing capacity in that aspect. Now, once you develop capacity, even as an undergraduate, you can go. For example, I started publishing when I was undergraduate. So there is nothing stopping any undergraduate from doing so. Over to you, Effiong.
Okay, some people are asking for, this one is not supposed to come in now, but we have so many of the questions coming in. They're asking for that tool for eliminating duplicate articles, since you mentioned it.
Okay, if you have, we have several one. The first one, although is usually paid, EndNote. So if your university have access to EndNote, you could use EndNote. Then there is some open source software. I'm trying to remember. Let me see if I think I have it. Let me just quickly check my phone. There is a new, I'm coming. Okay, yes. This is a Rayan QCROI. I think I will just type that on the chat box. I said EndNote. I use EndNote majorly. EndNote is actually like my favorite. EndNote, but your university will have to subscribe or you buy, which is quite expensive. Then this one is free. Raya URCI. So these are the two that I know. There are other tools that are yet available, but these are actually the one that I use more. So
okay.
I think that answered the question.
Yeah, yes.
I think some people are raising. I think you think
yes, we will take them. We have some line of questions. So
okay.
When we're done with that, we'll take them, please. Thank you. This one said, to conduct meta-analysis, which statistical program would you recommend to do forest plots and other plots? Is stats direct outdated? Is stats direct outdated? I'm not sure I got the question very well.
Stat what?
Is stats direct outdated? The person said to conduct meta-analysis, which statistical program would you recommend to do forest plots and other plots?
There are a lot of, there is a plot that I use often. There's a tool that I use most times. If you've seen most of my publication, it is called, what is the name of this tool? It was developed in the university. It was developed by a university, I think, in the US. So I will try to get the name, but there's another one. There's a Gmovi. Gmovi is also very good. Then there's, if you are proficient in the use of R, you can use R. Then Stata, I also use Stata. You can also use Stata. I've used Stata in some of in my study. Stata, I think Stata 17 have it. Then recently, I think SPSS version 26 has also introduced meta-analysis. So I think then Refman, if you are doing a quantitative study, especially a two-arm study, I will always recommend Refman for you. Then you may need to be trained on how to use it, but it is very robust and is recognized worldwide. But those are some of the tools that you can actually use for your meta-analysis.
All right, thank you very much.
So personally, I've actually used a lot of those tools, but I've used a lot of those tools too, but a lot of them are actually very easy to use, quite well. So over to you.
Okay, this person says, please, sir, can we use Pickle or Pickles to structure our research questions?
Yes,
other than systematic reviews. That means research questions for other types of studies.
Of course. Pickle is not. Pickle initially was designed. I think was designed for clinical trial-based study. So systematic review actually borrowed it from clinical trial designs, study designs. So it could also be used. Yes, you cannot be, for example, when you are defining your research question, even within your study or your thesis, you can't be doing a study that does not have population. Or will you be doing a study that there is no outcome you want to measure? Or will you be doing a study, if it's an experiment-based study, then you should be talking about intervention and also be talking about whether you're going to be comparing your primary intervention with a placebo or any other drug or any other thing. So you can use it in other kind of, but it is majorly used in clinical trial study and also in what is it called? And also, especially in epidemiological studies. If you, for those that are in public health, you see that we use a lot of this in epidemiological, Pickle in epidemiological studies. Over.
Okay, this person says, thanks once again for the well-delivered lecture. It appears like systematic literature review is done with only one research question. How can it be used for PhD, since we usually have more than one research question in social sciences and PhD is done by one person?
Yeah, this is wonderful. Now, I was expecting this question. Remember that when I was talking about outcomes, I mentioned primary outcome, then there are secondary outcomes. Primary outcome, then secondary outcomes. Now, if you are doing like the second, I hope the systematic review of a surveillance system in AMR in Africa is actually a part of a PhD study by someone that we work with. If you check that study, the authors, I was the only person that was not in the UK in that study, and all of them were from the same university. So you notice that that study was actually a part of a PhD. But I want to disabuse that, okay, so the person is saying that PhD is usually done by one person. It's not true. PhD is done by you and your team of supervisors. I was an external person that was brought in because I'm actually an expert in that area that was brought in to make sure that it passes the review process. So if there is need for you to bring an expert into your PhD, if you are doing a systematic review, your supervisors are supposed to co-author it with you. So they are supposed to screen the article and all other things with you. But yes, we know that, yeah, majorly you will be the one to do. That's why PhD, you are expected to also have, you can have research assistants. So nobody is telling you not to employ a research assistant. So you can have a primary outcome, but you have several secondary outcomes. So that's actually what forms other research questions that you will be answering. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah. Okay. This is from another person, from another source, getting your protocol so early and not finishing or never being able to complete the review limits, or never being able to complete the review limit others to take up that area of research and thereby sabotaging the opportunity to explore that area of research. What's your take on that? Very good question. Very interesting one.
Can you repeat that, please?
Okay. Getting your protocol so early and not finishing or never being
getting your protocol so what?
Early, as in registering your protocol early,
okay,
and then you're not able to complete the review itself. It limits others from taking up that area of research, and it sabotages your opportunity to explore that area of research. So the person is now saying, what's your take on that?
Yes, no. That is why if you check Prospero database, they will ask you your intended time of finishing. And I think, although I'm not sure, I think after some time, if it's not finished, I think there's a way they remove it from the system so that if any other person want to take up the work, it could actually do so. Now, I understand what you are thinking, that, okay, someone go ahead and register a protocol, and in the end, is not able to complete that work. Then other people want to come up with the same study, but they are not able to register that protocol again. We know that, yes, for you to be able to publish your work in some very good journals, it has to be registered. Yeah, is an issue. It's an issue, but I think there are ways through which you can also overcome that. You can look at how the person has designed his or her question. Then you can introduce another factor or introduce another then that will actually make it pass. Hello?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Hello, F. Young.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Hello?
Yes, please. Hello, I can hear you.
Please, can you hear me? Can anyone confirm that they can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Fortune, your line is...
Hello, I can hear you very well, Mr. Leonard. Hello? Okay. Hello, Mr. Leonard, can you hear me? I think, okay, I think the network is from his end. Akim, can you hear me? Okay, the network is from his end. Okay, please, we want to emphasize, please try and fill the feedback form.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Let me read the next question. The next question says, what is the difference between a scooping, literature, and mapping review? What is the difference between a scooping, literature, and mapping review?
Okay, I will try to answer that to the best I can. I think a scoping review is kind of, how do I put this now? A review that is not actually, is not systematic in a way. It's not systematic in a way, but is more, I think it's more advanced than, it's more detailed that just, it's more organized than narrative review, as the case may be. It's kind of, how do I put this now? It's kind of limited to a certain extent, or you know, from the word scoping, meaning that the way the review is done is actually done in such a way that it is there are some arm of systematic review that is not there. So that I think the issue of bias assessment and all of that is not there. But talking about mapping review, I think you are talking about, for example, bibliography review, when you do kind of a neural network mapping of studies that have been done in that area. I need to be clear, because when you say mapping review, I need to be sure of what you meant by mapping review, because mapping review, from what I know, is actually when you are doing a neural network of a bibliography of a particular topic that have been done. So if that's what you are doing, they are quite different. Hello?
Yes, Mr. Leonard, I can hear you.
So
you know, I didn't know the people that asked the question, so I'll just move forward. Okay. This person says, can you help us list international reputable journals and accept systematic review papers without charges? Maybe, Mr. Leonard, is this something you can do later or now?
Not, maybe we can speak to that later. I think a lot of journals accept, almost all journals, except few journals, that will tell you, okay, they don't accept systematic. A whole lot of journals accept systematic review. And systematic review is actually placed in the same category as ordinary research. That's what you need to understand. So you need to also understand that. So like a majority of the systematic review that are published is only the one I published in Pathogen that was paid for. Every other one, I don't think I've ever paid any publication fee for any systematic review that are published. So there are a lot of journals that are set for systematic review. But just check the ones that are does not cost charge, or that does not charge APC, or that APC is waived for you, then that will be fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. I think just 2 questions are left before we take those that are raising their hands. I am interested in a topic, but as far as I see, the literature is less than 10 papers. Is it okay? How many papers shall we have to begin a systematic review?
Yes. For systematic review, some author, if you are not doing a meta-analysis, even 2 or 3 papers is enough for systematic review. But if you're going to be doing a meta-analysis, for you to have a robust power of the study, I think I usually advocate. And what another thing, if you are going to be doing, there's what we call funnel plots, which is something that has to do with bias, bias assessment, bias assessment in systematic review. There are different school of thoughts. There's what we call AGAS test. A gas test, for example, you can only use a gas test when the included study are more than 10 or more. But if it's less than 10, there are other tests that you can also do. So there is actually no hard rule to the number of study that you can include. I think the first study that I published, I think we got 8 or 9 papers that were included and all of that. So there's no hard part to rule. So 10, provided that you've been able to establish that you've actually done a very good search and that those were actually the papers that met your inclusion criteria, it is acceptable.
All right, Ms. Elena, the last question before we can give participants the opportunity to speak. What factors determine the statistical method used in analysis of the primary data?
Now, the criteria that determine that is, if you are doing a quantitative study, then you'll be doing a meta-analysis. And if you are doing a meta-analysis, there are a lot of other statistics that you're going to be looking at. You will be looking at checking the heterogeneity. You have different methods. You'll be checking the, that is the I-square. You'll be checking the, you also check the funnel plots. Then there are a lot of other statistical methods that you're going to use. But basically, there are different schools of thought that actually determine the kind of statistic that you're going to be doing. Whether there's actually, when you are doing your funnel plot, for example, or when you are doing your meta-analysis, there are a lot of what's it called? There are a lot of theory or methods, statistical method that you can use. For example, is it fixed method? Are you going to be using a fixed method or a binary method? And all these are actually based on your heterogeneity. Now, if your heterogeneity is high, there's a particular method you are using. And if it is less than 50, there's also another method that you're going to do. But you know that this is not actually the purpose for this training. But by the time we're going to be going into details of meta-analysis, then we will discuss all the statistical aspects in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know. I'm still checking if there is any other question. I have not seen anyone. But while we're looking for, can we allow Eli Chimboyin Charles, please? Please go ahead and speak, Charles.
I think you need to unmute the person. Have you?
Oh, no.
Yeah,
no, I think...
good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leonard, on your presentation and everything. I have learned so much today. I'm also I just a current research. I just started. I just finished my undergraduate program, medical lab science. So I'm interested in writing review and everything. And so I've been not understanding what I've been trying to do out this way. But today, at least I can confidently say that I have gotten to a certain level. But my question now is, while you were presenting, you talked about having some clinical characteristics, clinical trials, and everything in a systematic review. So I want to understand, because I've read some review written by some of my chief. I want to understand what is between this inclusion of clinical trials and everything in systematic review and then an experimental research. So it's confusing me.
I think you missed that up. I was just trying to indicate. Now, systematic review can be done on prevalence studies. Just, for example, you want to check what is there's what we call pool prevalence. Okay. LHE has done prevalence in Port Harcourt. I don't know if you stay in Port Harcourt.
I stay in Ebony States.
Okay. Leonard have done, okay, let's say LHE has done prevalence of P54 gene in HIV in Port Harcourt. Leonard has done prevalence of P54 gene in Ekiti. Fortune have done P54 gene in Anambra, in Calabar. Then all the participants here, all of them have done P54 gene all over Nigeria. Now, we will now want to check, okay, what is the prevalence of P54 gene in Nigeria? You know that if we want to answer that question using normal experimental study, you have to take sample all over Nigeria, just like the last NIAS study that was done to check what is the prevalence, the real prevalence of HIV in Nigeria. Now, since we cannot do a primary study, now, okay, LA has done in Port Harcourt, have done in it. So I look at all the published work that each of us have done, then I extract the prevalence that all of us have done, then I will not get a single prevalence for P54G in Nigeria, which is now referred to as pooled prevalence of P54G in Nigeria. And that is not clinical trial. I don't know if you get me. Another thing is to check, okay, the impact of, okay, people are saying that if you take a bitter leaf, your glucose level will reduce. LHE have done the study in Ebonyi. Leonard have done the study in Ekiti. Effiong have done the study in Calabar. Okay, Effiong found out that, okay, when you use bitter leaf, this is the glucose level will reduce to this extent based on the number of participants that you have done, and those that do not take it, this is what happened. You know, that is like a case control study. You have done that, I have also done that. They will collect the data, our findings, they will not check, okay, the effect of bitter leaf on glucose, for example, based on our individual study. Now, we'll not check the effect, either checking the mean increase or decrease, or what is it called, or the standard error of mean or standard deviation or whatsoever that it may be. So is that, I think that should clear. So it's not only clinical trial. Clinical trial must not be your systematic review. That must be a mistake from your end. All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can we hear from Tatina? I'm sorry if I don't pronounce your name well. Nathan, can we hear from Nathan, please? Please try and be very brief because we have up to 3 more people. Thank you. Nathan, please go ahead. Do I have to unmute you?
I think you have to unmute him.
No, I think she cannot
Yes,
mute.
Yes, thank you very much. I've been waiting for you to unmute me. Thank you for the good presentation, Mr. Leonard. So my name is Nathan. I have a concern about data synthesis. So I needed to know or to be sure about data synthesis. Is it appropriate in systematic reviews with meta-analysis or without meta-analysis?
Okay.
And when...
Okay.
Sorry?
Now, I got your question. You're asking, okay, when we're talking about data...
In addition, and how to undertake it, how to undertake a systematic review. Just a brief note on it. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, basically, you're asking if data synthesis is with meta-analysis or without meta-analysis. Now, basically, data synthesis could be with meta-analysis or without meta-analysis. Now, for most people that are in social sciences or in even public health, especially in qualitative research, people that are doing qualitative research, most times they don't do meta-analysis. They yet do evidence synthesis or data synthesis. Now, the data we are talking about here is not, they are dealing with qualitative data. But if you're going to be doing a meta-analysis with doing quantitative, you'll be dealing with quantitative data. So in this regard, data synthesis can be will be in every systematic review, whether with system, whether with meta-analysis or no meta-analysis, because you need to synthesize your data to be able to actually get the evidence you are talking about. When we're talking about evidence synthesis, for example, let's say like the autistic example I gave. Now, let's say study, or let's talk about transformational leadership in organization, for example. Now, in transformational leadership, if you are doing a systematic review on transformational leadership, for example, let's say in health setting, now all you will want to do is to check, okay, whether does it improve performance or not performance. Now, in checking for this performance, you can either check using numeric data or use non-numeric data, whether behavioral pattern and all the right. So if you are checking for behavioral pattern, for example, you'll be doing synthesis for qualitative data. But if you are going to be checking for statistic evidence, then you'll be doing quantitative synthesis of evidence. So meaning you'll be looking for numeric data in that sense. So I don't know if that is clear. Then talking about running through how systematic is done, systematic review. Like we mentioned, you have to define your question. Have you defined your question? That will be from your topic, from the question you've defined. Then you have to design or define your eligibility criteria. Then you need to define you need to do your search by designing keywords that you're going to use to do your literature search using databases. Several databases have been mentioned. After you've done that, you do screening, you do, and you're doing article screening. They are in different stages. You remove duplication, then you do abstract screening. After abstract screening, then you do, you have to get the full article, then read the full article, then you extract the data that you need from that article, and I think then you synthesize your outcome, then you report your findings. So this just like the summary. Thank you. Effiong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. I think that's clear. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I think because of time, can we get Akinwale?
Okay, just one person, right? You just want one person, right?
Hello, Akinwale. Can you unmute?
Akinwale,
can you kindly unmute?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I've learned one or two things. I'm actually requesting to speak on the fact that I have a paper. I actually have a systematic review on medicinal plant. It's already ready, and then I'm trying to get it registered on Prospero. I only want to request if you can help me review it before submission. I'm not the only writer. We have some other couple of writers. I think we have more than 4 or 5 working on it. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, so I have shared, Mr. Leonard, sorry, before you respond, I have shared your LinkedIn.
If I get what you're saying, yes. Okay, go on.
I have shared your LinkedIn profile with them so that anybody that wants to make requests like this can, make it directly to your LinkedIn. I don't know if that's okay.
That's fine. Very fine. That's fine.
Okay, Valerie has made an appeal that she has a very important question. So please, I'm begging that we give her opportunity to speak. Valerie, go ahead, please. Okay, I have to unmute her.
Hello.
Yeah,
good evening. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Leonard. I have a question regarding what you said about social sciences, because I'm in social sciences.
Yeah.
And my understanding of systematic reviews,
yes.
Well, they include like experimental studies, and most times like randomized control trials.
Of course.
And so then you just mentioned something about qualitative, which triggered me because I was thinking that that is an integrative review. So I just wanted to confirm that, because I know that integrative reviews include experimental and non-experimental. So I thought that's where my question actually before you said that was to ask, how do you do that? Can you say the difference between systematic and integrative reviews? Because I know that for social sciences is different. So, but when you now said that,
I think basically, terminologies. Okay.
Hello.
You're breaking. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you got my question. I just wanted to know the
I think
difference.
if I get your first question, we're asking, for example, in social science, you have something that have to do with what you call integrative review.
Yes.
No, and also you mentioned randomized and non-randomized. So basically, for every sector, that's come into effect. Just like what who spoke just now. I think Akewale, when he was talking about his medicinal plant. Now, I'm sure that when he will actually be treating those whatever animals or whatever, they will have kind of a control. They will be randomized into several groups. So if I understand the context you're coming from now, when we talk about something integrative review, now these are actually terminologies that are used by different disciplines. I don't know if you were following me. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah, they are terminology that are used by different disciplines. I know for sciences, majorly, we stick to systematic review. But some other discipline may use other terminology like integrative review. Now, when you use the word integrative review, it still have to do with something that have to holistic review, as the case may be.
Oh yes, because integrative reviews include both experimental and non-experimental studies.
Now, this is where you are missing it. I think what you are talking is actually the methodology here we are looking at. Now, when you say experimental and non-experimental, that is kind of like a mixed method. Are you with me?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, it's like a mixed method. Don't get confused. Systematic review is systematic review, but you can actually have a mixed method in science or in sciences. We call it mixed method.
I just wanted to confirm
then
that you
mixed
can
method
do,
is usually when
you can do
dealing,
systematic reviews of qualitative studies.
Yes. So systematic review can be mixed method, meaning you'll be dealing with both qualitative and quantitative. Just like you said, you'll be doing both qualitative and non-quantitative studies. So that's like an integrated review. So meaning that your evidences will be divided into two. There will be an aspect of statistics, then there will be aspect of non-statistics. So that's why you see, for example, sometimes in reporting systematic review, see that someone will report that 100 papers were eligible for systematic review, but at the end, maybe only 70 made it to meta-analysis.
Because a lot of social science research in my field,
the 100 papers
qualitative based.
Yes, the 100 papers were used for systematic review, but for for the statistic aspect of it, which is the quantitative aspect of the work, only 70 people make it. So I think that's just there's no confusion about that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. Please, because of time, we'll have to stop here for the questions. But if you've joined the WhatsApp group, of course, you can always drop your question. And I believe Mr. Leonard will be available to attend to them. Or you can reach out to any of the hosts here. They are equally admins of ACRN, Dr. Florence, Rosalind Jackem, and I believe that they'll be able to take most of your questions. And whichever one we cannot take, Mr. Leonard is still part of our community. You can reach out to him through his email or through his LinkedIn. And then please, we want you to stay connected with us by Yeah, by following our social media handles. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and then we're on LinkedIn. So follow us so that whenever we have events, our events are always free. So, I mean, you can see the kind of quality that we have, what we are giving for free. So if we have any events, you will be notified. Mr. Leonard's email is in the chat box. And then please, the feedback is very important. The feedback form is very important. And you will also be seeing the link to the WhatsApp group in the feedback form, but I have tested it separately if you cannot find it, because some persons are complaining they cannot find it. So I've pasted the WhatsApp link separately. Okay, sorry. Can any of the admins paste the WhatsApp group link again, please? I'm finding it difficult to locate it, please. So, Mr. Leonard, while they're doing that, Mr. Leonard is one of the mentors of our hub. And then with time, what we are looking at is developing some sort of mentor program, such that you can have access to peers, I mean, people that want to write systematic reviews, and then you can also have access to mentors like Mr. Leonard, who will be available to take you through the process. So it's this might be the first step. I mean, the step of developing your topic and research question. So really encourage that you fill the form and join the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much. Dr. Florence, Rosalind, anything please before we call it a night?
I think we are good to go.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Please and please and please, you have to stay connected. It's if you're not joining WhatsApp group, you have our email so that you don't complain. Somebody's mic is on, it's echoing. You have to stay connected.
People are asking if they're going to get the slides and the recording. So we'll get back to them.
Of this process. Thank you very much.
I can make the slide available. I can make the slide available so you can share with everyone.
Yes, the video will also be available. Thank you very much. It is not going to end here. It is going to end in practical sessions like some of us have suggested. So thank you very much and see you next month.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Well, thank you.
Good morning, depending on where you're joining from. Feedback link. For those that still do not have it, I'm going to post it here. Yeah, this is the feedback link, and then I'm going to share the WhatsApp group again, and I'm sharing the WhatsApp group. WhatsApp. Okay, yeah, so you can join. You can write to us, acrn.int@gmail.com. You can reach out to any of us on WhatsApp, on email, on LinkedIn. You can follow our social media handles. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and we're on Twitter. WhatsApp link, okay.